The Secrets of the Cafe. Part 1. Chapter 1. The Guardian of the Town. Lin Jiexin grew up in this ancient and tranquil town. Having lost her parents at a young age, she was raised by her aunt. Her aunt was a respected herbal medicine shop owner in the area, skilled in blending various herbs and medicinal dishes. She taught Jiexin the knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine bit by bit, guiding her on how to observe people's words and actions, and how to understand the warmth and coldness of human emotions. Jiexin absorbed these lessons, not only learning to grow herbs and perfect cooking skills, but also developing a keen sense of observation and a calm personality. She could easily detect subtle shifts in the emotions of those around her, as if she was born with a pair of eyes capable of seeing through people's hearts. Jiexin's personality was reserved and somewhat detached. She seemed to have a natural vigilance, always maintaining an appropriate distance from strangers. Yet, deep inside, she harbored a profound concern for people and life. The cafe she managed was located in a secluded corner of the town, decorated with an elegant and cozy ambience. Jiexin was skilled in brewing handmade coffee and would select the perfect coffee flavor for each customer based on their mood and temperament. She was not only the most respected barista in the town but also an invisible guardian, using her calm, sharp intuition and meticulous care to soothe the hearts of every customer who walked in. Jiexin's mind was delicate and suspicious. She could easily notice the slightest gestures and facial changes of others and spot things that ordinary people might overlook. It was this sharp intuition that made the atmosphere of her cafe comfortable and relaxing, attracting many regulars from the town and becoming a refuge for the local spirits. However, Jiexin always maintained an unshakable distance, as though she was destined to bear some invisible responsibility to protect the hidden side of this town. There was an old legend that had been passed down in the town. Those who carried the bloodline of the guardian were said to possess extraordinary intuition and observation, capable of foreseeing or sensing the signs of disaster and protecting the townspeople in their own way. Jiexin had heard her aunt tell these stories since she was young. Though she was half skeptical, she always felt an inexplicable connection deep within her. Whenever her intuition told her when to avoid or pay attention to something, she would often notice some anomaly at the crucial moment, as if some force was guiding her. Jiexin was half believing, yet astonished by her own sharp intuition. In her heart, she felt like the border of the deep forest in the town, between the known and the unknown. Her cafe stood quietly in the town, like a haven, but it also seemed to hide some secrets that no one knew. One rainy afternoon, Jiexin stood by the window, silently observing the alley outside. The cold wind and fine rain beat against the glass, and the entire street appeared even more silent in the misty rain. Just then, a figure slowly walked from the rain. It was a stranger, a man dressed in a black trench coat, standing out sharply against the rain. His steps were steady and slow, carrying an elusive aura. He pushed open the cafe door, and Jiexin felt a faint unease rise in her heart. The man wore silver-framed glasses, his face haggard and pale, his brows showing a hint of suppressed melancholy. Jiexin carefully observed him, noting the details quietly, and discovered that he wore a silver ring on his left ring finger. The ring was engraved with a pattern she had never seen before, a unique symbol of the town, representing protection and loyalty. However, the chill emanating from the man made it hard for Jiexin to associate him with such meanings. The man ordered a cup of Jiexin's homemade classic black coffee, and throughout the process, he hardly spoke, his gaze fixed on the window as if waiting for something. Jiexin's gaze often lingered on him, and her intuition told her that this man was no ordinary person, and that there was some secret hidden within him. However, she did not rush to ask questions, instead silently burying her observations deep in her heart. He sat by the window for a long time, his hand trembling slightly as he held the coffee cup, as if trapped in extreme tension. Jiexin watched him from behind the counter, a wave of unease rising in her heart, as though her intuition was warning her. Just then, the man suddenly pulled out his phone, looked down for a moment, then quickly stood up and hurriedly left, leaving the nearly untouched black coffee behind. The man disappeared into the rain, and Jiexin stood by the window, gazing at the empty street. A sense of alertness and unease quietly grew within her. Deep in her heart, a vague premonition told her that the visit in the storm was not a coincidence, but the beginning of some unknown disaster. Chapter 2: The Vanishing Shadow. Since the mysterious man first entered the cafe, Jiexin had felt a shadowy atmosphere lingering around her. In the days after the man left, there were continuous reports of young women going missing in the town. First, it was a girl who had just graduated from university, then a young woman who worked at the local grocery store, followed by several out-of-town tourists staying in the town. These disappearances cast a silent mystery over the entire town, making the residents uneasy and fearful. The streets became less crowded, and at night, they were deserted, as if even the wind had stopped out of fear. Jiexin's unease grew stronger. She tried to recall the faces of the missing women but realized some of them were regular customers of her cafe. In fact, some had even visited her cafe on the very day they disappeared. The coincidence sent chills down her spine, and the figure of the man appeared in her mind, the cold eyes, the silver ring with the town's unique symbol, as though he had been secretly watching her every move. One night, after closing the cafe, Jiexin was cleaning up when she suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside. She stopped what she was doing, slowly walked to the window, and opened a small gap to peer outside. The dimly lit street was empty, but she distinctly felt something watching her from the darkness, like eyes hidden in the shadows, filled with cold malice. She tried to convince herself it was just an illusion, turned to continue cleaning, but the unease lingered. Her eyes inadvertently scanned every corner of the cafe, but she kept feeling a dark figure fleetingly at the edge of her vision, as if someone was quietly standing in the corner, watching her every move. Jiexin felt a chill run down her spine, and even her breathing became cautious. A few days later, the man appeared again in the cafe. This time, he looked even more haggard, his eye sockets deep, his skin pale, as though he was floating like a shadow in the night. He silently ordered black coffee, sitting in a corner without speaking, holding the cup but not drinking. Jiexin watched him from behind the counter, a strange unease rising within her, as if some irresistible darkness was surrounding him. Summoning her courage, she approached and asked, "There have been a few disappearances in the town recently. Have you heard about it?" Her voice trembled, but she tried to stay calm. The man looked up, his cold and hollow eyes locking onto her, making her instinctively take a step back. He slowly whispered, "These things have nothing to do with me." His voice was low and hoarse, carrying a trace of coldness, as if it came from the underworld. As he spoke, His eyes flickered with a dangerous light, freezing Jiexin in place, and a deeper fear crept into her heart. The man seemed to sense her unease and gave a cold, mocking smile before standing up and leaving, his steps light as though a ghost slipping through the night. Jiexin watched him vanish into the dark street, the unease rising like a tide in her chest. That night, she tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep, the man's cold eyes and the missing girl's faces repeating in her mind. She seemed to see helpless eyes in the dark, silently speaking of fear and despair, as if crying out for help, but no one could hear their voices. In the following days, Jiexin's mental state slowly deteriorated. She felt an invisible pressure, whether inside the cafe or on the streets of the town, as though someone was following her closely in the darkness. At night, she often heard faint footsteps or soft knocks on the door. When she pulled back the curtains, the street was always empty, shrouded in deep darkness, swallowing her whole. Jiexin understood that this was no coincidence. She felt herself being drawn into an invisible whirlpool, and perhaps the truth behind the disappearances was far more terrifying than she could imagine. Chapter 3: Stalking and Revelation. Jiexin's heart was increasingly filled with unease and curiosity. The mysterious aura of the man and the string of disappearances could not be erased from her mind. She knew she should not investigate further, but her intuition pushed her to take action. Jiexin decided that if the man appeared again, she would follow him, no matter the cost. One evening, the air was cold, and twilight covered the outline of the town, with streetlights flickering weakly. The man, like a ghost, silently pushed open the cafe door. His figure seemed even more exhausted and heavy than before. Jiexin's heart sank. This long-absent figure was before her again, and his eyes remained as cold and distant as ever. This time, he carried a small leather bag, which seemed to contain something important. He carefully placed it on the table, always maintaining a heightened sense of alertness. The man quickly settled his bill and turned to leave. Jiexin swiftly removed her apron, put aside her tasks, and carefully followed him, keeping a safe distance. His steps were brisk and heavy, and as he walked further away, the streetlights grew sparser, and the street became eerily silent, as if the entire town had sunk into a dark abyss. Jiexin held her breath, her hands unconsciously tightening, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She knew this was dangerous, but some irresistible force drove her forward. She kept reminding herself to stay calm and keep her distance, yet every time her gaze fell on the small leather bag, her unease and doubt grew stronger, as if some dangerous secret was wrapped inside. The man walked through the streets of the town, turning into a narrow alley. Jiexin cautiously followed, hiding in the shadows, holding her breath, afraid the man might detect her presence. At the end of the alley was a dense forest. The man seemed very familiar with the path, walking into the woods without hesitation. Jiexin hesitated for a moment before summoning the courage to follow. The light in the forest was dim, and strange low humming sounds filled the air, making Jiexin shiver. She walked lightly, careful not to step on any twigs that might make a noise. The further the man went, the colder the air seemed, as though something was hiding deep in the woods, silently watching her. Finally, the man stopped at a secluded clearing. Jiexin hid behind a tree, cautiously observing his actions. She saw the man place the leather bag on the ground, open it, and take out some strange objects she had never seen before: a candlestick, several black stones, and a few metal gloss charms. The man began arranging these items as if performing some kind of ritual. Jiexin's eyes widened. Her heart raced with fear, as if she had discovered something extremely dangerous. She realized this man was not just a visitor in the town. He was hiding a deep, terrible secret. Just then, the man's head turned suddenly, and his sharp gaze locked onto her hiding place. Jiexin's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded fiercely as she tried to retreat into the darkness of the trees, but it was too late. The man's voice, cold as ice, came from behind. "You shouldn't have followed me." And at that moment, Jiexin realized that her role in the town had just shifted from being the observer to becoming part of a story far darker than she could have ever imagined.